Happy May the 4th, everyone, and yeah, given that it's May the 4th today, I thought it would be very appropriate for me to pretty much do something Star Wars related. Now, I love Star Wars. It's one of my favorite franchises just out there. I mean, when it comes to the movies, the various games, comics, books, action figures, and TV shows, it's just such a vast franchise that it's crazy to think that it only started off as just a trilogy of movies from the 70s and the 80s, which grew into pretty much a religion. As this is May the 4th today, I thought it would be very appropriate for me to do a ranking of sorts, like a film ranking, for example, and yes, I'm doing that. And the TV show ranking as well. Yes, I decided to include the Star Wars Skywalker Saga movies, the spin-off films, and the TV shows as part of the ranking. Now, only two rules apply. One, I'm only going to include the movies and TV shows that are part of Disney's canon, so no holiday special, thank goodness, no Ewok movies, no Ewok cartoon, and yes, that also means no Clone Wars micro-series. So with that out of the way, here is my Star Wars movie and TV show ranking. Now let's jump into Lightspeed because this is where the fun begins. Number 16, Star Wars The Clone Wars. No, not the TV show. We're going to get to that much later. I'm talking about pretty much the pilot, which is a theatrical feature-length film released in 2008, and oh man, it's a mess. I mean, this movie is so bad that the Clone Wars TV show has quite a fan base, and even fans who adore the Clone Wars can admit, yeah, the Clone Wars movie is terrible. I mean, for one, the characters are very wooden. Anakin and Ahsoka's student-master relationship has them bickering constantly like they're an old married couple. And as for Ahsoka Tano, how did she become a fan favourite after this? Because all she did was whine and complain, and she was such a brat. And also the animation, for a film that came out in 2008 when Kung Fu Panda and Wall-E came out, two visually gorgeous movies even to this day, the animation in Clone Wars, it looks like the worst CGI from the special editions, but used for the whole movie. And I mean, it's even bad for Clone Wars standards. I mean, for one, the characters look very static at some points. The lightsaber moves are very robotic, and the characters barely emote. It's just, and also the film constantly has action scene after action scene and after action scene, and it gets boring really quick, and there's not really much of a plot here. It's just a series of events that happen, and I thought the best way to describe this is basically watching Clone Wars the movie is like you're binge watching the worst episodes of a great TV show. And the only way I could recommend the Clone Wars movie is watch up until Anakin says the line, "You may not make it as Obi-Wan's apprentice, but you may make it mine," and just switch off from there and just move on to the next chronological episode, because it's a miracle that the Clone Wars show even survived after this trash. Number 15, Star Wars Resistance. Now, we already had an anime. Now, Dave Filoni has made a name for himself within the Star Wars community as he gave us Clone Wars, which I will get to, don't worry. And he also made an animated show based around the original trilogy era, Rebels, which I'll talk about later. So it was bound to happen that he would make an animated show based on the sequel trilogy, and yeah, I've only seen like 7 episodes of the first season, and I feel like I've seen enough for me to actually judge my opinion, and yeah, this show is not that great. I mean, I get that this show is aimed towards kids, hence why it aired on the Disney Channel, but man, the humour is just so forceful and not even that funny. I didn't even laugh nor crack a smile. And the main character, Kazuda, I can't even remember his name. I can't even remember his last name, so his name is just Kaz. He's pretty obnoxious, and he's this New Republic pilot that is wanting to join the Resistance, and the character's just not that interesting, and he's incredibly obnoxious and very clumsy too. But Kazuda is tolerable in comparison to Niku. Oh my goodness, Niku. The best way I can describe him is he's the Disney Star Wars equivalent to Jar Jar Binks. But that's all. And the rest of the cast aren't really all that interesting or memorable. I mean, for Tam, there were some instances where I thought, okay, she maybe grows a character, but not really. And as for... Oh, I can't even remember that astromech droid. He's basically Chopper 2.0, and yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about Resistance. Even the animation looked very weird, and it's trying to be all cel-shaded, but I don't know, it just doesn't entirely work, and who knows, maybe the show will get better, and I think it will, but I don't think it'll go any higher than number 15. Number 14. Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Now we're getting onto the Skywalker saga of films, and wow, what a way to finish, because oh man, I mean, I get people didn't like The Last Jedi, but man, this film really does go out of its way to try and forget some of the things that happened in The Last Jedi. Like, for example, Rose Tico, she barely has a part in it. Rey's parentage completely reworked to go from her being abandoned on Jakku because her parents were nobodies and they wanted drinking money, to her parents wanting to protect her because she's the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine. In which, speaking of which, they did not justify his return very well, and his return really took away from his defeat in Return of the Jedi, and also Rey being a Palpatine really takes away some of the admittedly interesting hooks about Rey's character, where she wasn't a Skywalker, she wasn't a Kenobi, and she wasn't a Solo or Palpatine. She was her own character, but because people complained about that plot twist, they made her Palpatine. And I don't know. And also, I really hated how much fan service was shoved in your face. No, sorry. Original trilogy fan service was shoved in your face, because any prequel fan service in The Rise of Skywalker was either brushed aside, shoved into the background, or completely ignored. I mean, this film makes so many contradictions to the sequel trilogy that I mean, there are some good things about the Rise of Skywalker, like the cinematography. I thought the cinematography was quite stellar, and the action was also pretty good as well. I mean, and also Finn, all he does throughout the whole film is just run around and shout, "Ray!" It's no wonder John Boyega was done with Star Wars after this, because the other best thing I could say about The Rise of Skywalker is Ben Solo / Kylo Ren. I refuse to acknowledge this film as the end of the Skywalker saga, because it really ended the sequel trilogy on a whimper. Number 13. Solo, A Star Wars Story. The second live-action Star Wars spin-off movie, and also the first Star Wars movie to bomb big time at the box office. I mean, upon watching this movie, it's not really much of a surprise that this film wasn't a big winner at the box office, because did we really need a movie about Han Solo's origins? I mean, okay, let's get to the good stuff about Solo. I think Alden Ehrenreich did the best he could with the material that was given to him, and even though it doesn't have the charisma Harrison Ford had. I still thought he did a good job, and he worked well with Chewbacca. But the highlight of the movie was Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian. I mean, he was charming, charismatic, and yeah, I just thought he was such a cool guy. The Kessel Run sequence was a lot of fun. I absolutely love the Kessel Run sequence. I mean, it's just classic Star Wars. Everything else about Solo is... I mean, the only part of Solo that I honestly really hate is how Han Solo got his name, where basically when he told that one Imperial officer when he was enlisting that I don't have a people, and the Imperial officer was like, okay, Solo. Okay, that's your name, Han Solo. And I'm like, ugh, why? Oh, L3 was pretty annoying. But apart from that, I don't really have any strong feelings towards Solo. I mean, it's just a pretty forgettable movie, to be honest. And that's probably the biggest sin a Star Wars movie can commit. It's forgettable. I mean, it wastes great actors like Woody Harrelson and Emilia Clarke and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, as Beckett and Kira weren't really all that interesting. And like I said, L3 is annoying. And as for that one cameo towards the end, wasn't needed. Was not needed at all. But apart from that, Solo, not awful, it's not even bad, it's just forgettable. I mean, I will say this, if it wasn't for Solo's box office failing, we probably wouldn't get a certain show I will discuss later on. Number 12. Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The one that kickstarted the prequel trilogy and the one that kickstarted the entire Skywalker saga. And it could have been a lot better, in all honesty. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It's not very good. I mean, the story was not really all that interesting, as it basically deals with political treaties on trade routes and... what? And the characters were pretty flat. Like, Qui-Gon Jinn. I'm only talking about Qui-Gon Jinn in this film alone. I mean, I heard he's actually a really good character outside of this film, but man, he was pretty bland. And Liam Neeson, it wasn't one of Liam Neeson's best roles. And Jar Jar Binks, need I say more? And I know this is going to be a very, very, very controversial opinion, but I didn't think Darth Maul was that great in this film. I mean, just in this film, let me assure you. I mean, outside this film, like Clone Wars and Rebels and various comics, he is a fantastic villain and one of the best characters. But here, all he does is just stand around, look cool, occasionally bring out his lightsaber and get killed. Defeated in a very pathetic way. And at the very least, the duel with him and Obi-Wan was exciting, and it had Duel of the Fates playing. And as for Jake Lloyd as Anakin Skywalker, I feel really sorry for this kid. I mean, ever since The Phantom Menace came out, he has never had an easy life. But I mean, there are still things to say good things about with The Phantom Menace, but at the end of the day, I just think it's incredibly mediocre as a film on its own. Number 11. Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, unfortunately, this movie carries over some of the problems that The Phantom Menace had. I forgot to mention some of the other problems with Phantom Menace, like the pretty bad acting and the pretty wooden dialogue. Well, most of that is carried over into Attack of the Clones, and some of it was worse. Like, Hayden Christensen as Anakin. Oh man, he was such a whiny brat, and his romance with Padme Amidala, with the exception of the picnic scene, are some of the worst romance scenes I've ever seen in a big budget motion picture, where the actors shared little to no chemistry, the dialogue is beyond abysmal, and John Williams was the only reason why those scenes were even watchable. And also, this film is filled to the brim with admittedly dated CGI that looked good in 2002, but come on, considering that Gollum came out the same year as this, it actually dates the movie even more. However, the reason why I put this above Phantom Menace is because it at the very least has somewhat of an engaging plot. Keyword here, somewhat, with Padme being targeted for assassination and Anakin having to protect her, and Obi-Wan trying to find out who's behind the assassination plot, and it kind of leads into the much bigger picture with the Clone Wars. That's kind of interesting. And there are some really good action scenes, like the speeder chase at the very start, and Obi-Wan's fight with Jango Fett, and the arena fight. I mean, it's all actually kind of entertaining. And also the scene with Anakin trying to save his mum from the Tusken Raiders but failing is actually pretty powerful. But apart from that, not really much else I can say about Attack of the Clones, apart from it being, it's painfully mediocre. Number 10. Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Time hasn't really been too kind to The Force Awakens, in all honesty, and that's mainly due to the fact of how the sequel trilogy ended. But I will admit, this was a somewhat promising start to the sequel trilogy. I mean, I actually like the new characters like Rey, Finn, Poe, and Kylo Ren. I actually thought those characters showed promise, and Kylo Ren was the only one to actually fulfill that promise, mostly. And I thought the return of the old cast, like Han, Leia, Chewbacca, were handled really well, and yeah, I mean, also, that one scene with Han Solo, that is still a powerful scene. And also the action is very well done, and it's also a really well-paced Star Wars movie. Unfortunately, this film has glaring flaws. I think if you guess the most obvious one, the plot is basically of A New Hope. I mean, a droid holding vital information and trying to get it to the good guy's side with the help of someone from a desert planet. Come on! It's A New Hope again! While the story was very derivative, I still think the film was very well paced, and I'm gonna be honest, that final scene with Rey handing out the lightsaber to Luke Skywalker still gives me chills. Number 9. Star Wars Rebels. Dave Filoni's second endeavour into the Star Wars universe, and pretty much the first thing produced by Disney when it came to Star Wars after their buyout of Lucasfilm. Basically the animated show that bridged the gap between the prequel era and the original trilogy era, and how is it? Pretty good, actually. I actually really like Rebels. I mean, I think the cast of characters, those being Kanan Jarrus, Ezra Bridger, Sabine Wren, Harrison Dula, and Zeb Orellos, and also Chopper, actually are really good characters and actually go through some pretty good arcs, especially Kanan Jarrus. Ugh. And I will admit, the first season of Rebels is basically the show just finding its feet, but it's the second season where it really does stick the landing, and I honestly think the great stuff about season 2 of Rebels, like Twilight and The Apprentice, I think are franchise highlights. Season 3, very hit and miss. I mean, Chopper does get a bit, the asteroid droid does get annoying, and it introduces that Alan Rickman sounding protocol droid, AP5, who really got on my nerves and was basically a more annoying version of C-3PO. I don't find 3PO annoying, by the way. But season 4, well, not as good as season 2, I think really did end the show on a good note. And yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about Rebels. I mean, if you haven't seen this show before or were put off by the more cartoony art style compared to Clone Wars, I'd highly recommend giving this show a chance. Number 8, Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Yep, the first ever live action Disney Star Wars spin off movie, and I still think it's great, but not perfect. I think this movie is a bit overhyped by fans. For one, the characterization is pretty bland, in all honesty, not very interesting. In fact, the only interesting characters I can think of are Jyn Erso, Chirrut Imwe, and K2SO, and that's basically it, to be honest. And also, the first 2 acts can be a bit of a slog to get through, as they're constantly jumping between planets, and yeah, it just takes a while for the plot to get going. And I thought Forrest Whitaker was wasted as Saw Gerrera, especially as the trailers promised Saw Gerrera a greater role, and I was even more disappointed after seeing Saw Gerrera in Clone Wars and Rebels. But let's get to the really good stuff about Rogue One. Well, I did say the first 2 acts are a bit of a slog to get through. Not Phantom Menace levels of boring, but still a bit of a slog. The 3rd act, the Battle of Scarif, is amazing. I mean, even though I didn't initially care for the characters to begin with, I cared when they bit the dust and sacrificed themselves for the rebellion. And Darth Vader. I mean, need I say more about Darth Vader? And the dogfight for the Battle of Scarif was one of the best dogfights in the series, in all honesty. And yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about Rogue One. I think it's a great movie. Number 7, Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Oh man, this may as well be my most controversial place here, and yeah, I mean, never before have I seen a movie cause this much debate. But I'm not going to talk about the very divisive response The Last Jedi had. What do I think of the movie? I think it's really good. I mean, I know the character portrayal of Luke Skywalker was very controversial, and even Mark Hamill had a few things to say about Luke's character portrayal. I honestly didn't mind it, and it actually felt kind of in line with the original trilogy, as he basically did think the Jedi did bring misery to the galaxy, as they were too ignorant to notice that Palpatine, the Dark Lord of the Sith, was right there in their faces, and their negligence towards Anakin Skywalker led to him turning to the dark side. I mean, you can't really blame Luke, and with him trying to kill his nephew, I mean, Luke was all as shown in the original trilogy when going off to save Han and Leia in Cloud City and just about to kill Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi. He was a character that always acted on instinct, and sometimes that costed him. But yeah, but by the end of the film, we really do see the Luke Skywalker we all remember from Return of the Jedi when he goes to confront Ben Solo. And I still think Luke Skywalker's sacrifice was handled beautifully. And Mark Hamill's fantastic in the role. Adam Driver is fantastic as Kylo Ren, as he does go through a bit of an arc where after he killed Han Solo, he's still very unsure of himself, but when he kills Snoke, that's where he thinks the dark side is where he belongs, and it was really setting him up to be the big bad of Episode 9, and I would have really liked to see that come to fruition. And also, I admittedly liked the Rey nobody twist. I mean, it was something fresh for Star Wars, and it showed just because you don't come from greatness, you choose your own path. And I think that's what Rian Johnson was going for with Rey being a nobody. And also the fight with Rey and Kylo Ren against the Praetorian Guards, I think is epic and one of the best filmed, best choreographed fight scenes in the whole saga. With the exception of that one mistake where one of the knives disappears in between takes, but I digress. Everything else about the movie, I can honestly see where people would have a problem with it, like the Canto Bight subplot and Holdo. Okay, admittedly, I do actually find Holdo a bit irritating. But in terms of the Canto Bight subplot, I kind of get where they're going for with the Canto Bight subplot with Finn and Rose, but maybe it could have been executed a little bit better. But yeah, that's all I pretty much have to say about The Last Jedi. I think it's a great movie, but, I'm going to be brutally honest right now. If they just stuck with Colin Trevorrow's Episode 9 Duel of the Fates, and it actually followed through what The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens 2 built up, rather than just going for The Rise of Skywalker, just basically chucked everything out the window, I honestly think the sequel trilogy would have been looked upon in a more positive light, because, well, I'm just about to talk about that in the next movie. Number 6, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, when it comes to the prequel trilogy, it started off poor with The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, but Revenge of the Sith is actually really good, and it actually made the 2 prequel films worthwhile, unlike The Rise of Skywalker, where it said, you just wasted your time. But back to Revenge of the Sith. The plot is actually engaging, and the acting, specifically from Ewan McGregor, is actually and Ian McDiarmid, is actually better than the previous 2 films. And also, it actually has some pretty impactful moments, like Order 66 and after Anakin and Obi-Wan's duel. I mean, that is actually quite impactful. And I also love the ending scene. I also love the ending montage where we see Padme's funeral, Darth Vader and Palpatine overlooking the construction of the Death Star, and baby Luke and baby Leia being dropped off at Tatooine and Alderaan, respectively. It really leads into the original trilogy incredibly well, and also has some great action scenes as well, especially the opening. And yeah, that's pretty much all the positives I can pretty much say about Revenge of the Sith. If there's any negatives I do have the film, it's that Hayden Christensen, well, he is better here as Anakin, is still pretty flat in a lot of scenes. Matt Lanter, he ain't. And also, there are many unintentionally funny moments that became meme-worthy, like Palpatine going, "Unlimited power!" and Obi-Wan going, "It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!" That was terrible. I'm not trying to shout here. And also, this opinion may also be a bit unpopular, but I don't think the duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan is the best in the saga or the series. I mean, I will say this. When the fight's more grounded, like when Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting in the command center, and when they're bouncing on the pipes, and even when they're floating on those 2 droids and transports on the lava bed, it's actually quite tense. I'm really into it. But when it's on that huge pillar floating along the lava bed, I'm like, can we please get on with it? I know, it just goes on for far too long. And yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about Revenge of the Sith. I mean, it does have some flaws. I won't deny that, but it gets a lot of things right. And like I said, unlike The Rise of Skywalker, where it made you think you waste your time by watching The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, Revenge of the Sith was like, You made it here in the end after going through Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace. I'll give you a pat in the back. It was worthwhile. Number 5. The Mandalorian. Now, when the show was initially announced, I didn't really know what to think. I mean, I didn't want to set my expectations too high, so I was like, okay, we'll just wait and see. I mean, it was pretty much new territory for Star Wars since it was the first live-action TV show, and it didn't focus on any pre-established characters like Luke, Han, Leia, and Chewbacca. But thankfully, when this show aired, I was pretty blown away because, man, I mean, Din Djarin, he's one of the best Star Wars characters ever. And he's probably my favourite bounty hunter as well. I mean, something I can really give credit to Pedro Pascal is that even though for a majority of the series he wears his helmet because due to Mandalorian tradition you can't remove your helmet, he was able to convey so much. And you could tell what he's thinking by not seeing his face. I mean, just by his acting and the tone of his voice, it's just brilliantly done. And I cannot go without mentioning this adorable wee thing, Grogu. The one that made Star Wars fans everywhere go crazy and think he is just the cutest thing in the galaxy, and oh, he sure is. I mean, okay, despite Grogu being such a cute wee thing, Grogu is also a great character on his own, as he does actually help out Din Djarin in quite a few occasions, and he's responsible for most of the comedy within the show. Nothing laugh out loud, but enough to go, that was funny. Unlike the sequel trilogy where it does try way too hard in humour, where it's not really that funny. But yeah, and also with the score by Ludwig Göransson, like I said, as it wasn't John Williams sounding, I was initially very, very, very skeptical, but Ludwig Göransson proved me wrong, and I found myself listening to the Mandalorian theme. I'm going to be really honest here. I think the Mandalorian theme may stand toe-to-toe with the Star Wars theme itself. It's that good. And I also love how the second season actually brought certain characters from the Clone Wars, like actually just 2 characters from the Clone Wars, like Ahsoka Tano and Bo-Katan, and they were done really well. And Dave Filoni pulled the Darth Maul with Boba Fett, and wow. I mean, I absolutely adore The Mandalorian, and I honestly cannot wait for any more Star Wars related projects with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni at the helm, like Ahsoka and Book of Boba Fett. And it honestly makes me really think that Jon Favreau should have been the one that helmed the sequel trilogy from the start, but what's done is done. Isn't that right, Grogu? Yeah. Number 4, The Clone Wars. Now, I've already talked about the movie. It's absolute garbage. The Clone Wars TV show, on the other hand, is spectacular. Something I really love about the Clone Wars TV show is that it takes some of the biggest criticisms with the prequel trilogy, like its mishandling of Anakin Skywalker and how the only members of the Jedi Council being represented are Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, and Mace Windu. Those have been rectified because Anakin Skywalker, well, he does have that bad side to him, and he has that building darkness within him. He's actually they actually portrayed him as a great hero, and also a really likable character as well. And also, Ahsoka Tano. I mean, like I said, she had a terrible start with Clone Wars, but as the series progressed, not only did I think she became a fantastic character, but she also became the best female character within the franchise next to Leia. And I also love how each of the clones actually have have personalities of their own, like Captain Rex, Echo, Fives. and The Bad Batch, which is coming out, I honestly, this show, I will address a few things about Clone Wars. For one, I don't like how the first 3 seasons were aired out of order and StarWars.com had to upload a chronological episode list. And there are some pretty weak arcs. In fact, some pretty bad arcs, in all honesty. But this is the type of show where the good swamps the bad, and when it comes to this, and there's also some fantastic arcs like the Battle of Umbris, the Mortis arc, every arc relating to Mandalore, and also the arc where Ahsoka gets framed and left the Jedi Order, and there's also the arc where Yoda finds more about the Force. I mean, it is just fantastic. I mean, Clone Wars is just so good, and I think I might need to rewatch Clone Wars, but in chronological order this time, because I mean, Bad Batch may be great, but I think Clone Wars is still the best thing Dave Filoni gave to this franchise. Number 3, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Now we're at the top 3, and we're on to the trilogy that started it all. Now, what can I say about Return of the Jedi? I mean, sure, it's the weakest one. I mean, I did think the idea of there being a second Death Star basically came out of nowhere. Pretty uninspired, in all honesty. And also, I did think they kind of forgot about the fact that Lando Calrissian betrayed Han Solo, where the last time Han saw Lando was when he betrayed him in Cloud City. So, I mean, going by Han Solo's point of view, after being frozen in carbonite, he would have just left Lando to get eaten by the Sarlacc pit. But I think there might be a conversation between Lando and Han off screen, or maybe Luke assured Han that it's okay, he's on our side. I don't know. And that's pretty much the only flaw I have with Return of the Jedi. I absolutely adore Return of the Jedi. The action is spectacular, and like the battle on Jabba's sail barge at the start of the film in the first act, and also the Battle of Endor is fantastic, and there's also the space battle on the Death Star 2. And let's not forget the climactic duel between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, which is what I think is the best lightsaber duel out of any Star Wars movie, any Star Wars thing, for that matter. Because this is really the movie that really made Darth Vader into a very complex character, and you could really see that Luke is trying his best to bring his father back to the light side, and Vader thinks it's too late for him. And seriously, there's some scenes in Return of the Jedi that do bring a tear to my eye, in all honesty. And there are also some fantastic scenes, like when Luke was talking to Leia about how he reveals to her that Darth Vader is his father, and that was pretty much him just pretty much accepting the fact that Darth Vader is his father. Now, you're my sister, Leia, and if I don't make it back, you're our only hope for the rebellion. And I don't know. I mean, I may like The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, but this was a great conclusion to the Skywalker saga. Number 2, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. If there is an example of a sequel done right, it would be Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, because basically what it does is that it takes our characters from the first film and tests them emotionally. Like, Luke, for a majority of the film, is separated from Han and Leia and Chewbacca, and he's been put through many mental trials throughout the film, like his training on Dagobah, and even Han Solo goes through a character arc. Like, he starts off having to leave the rebellion to pay off a debt, to help to assisting Leia when escaping the Empire, and even going to the point where he gave his life when being frozen in carbonite. And yeah, and also this film has some of the best action scenes in all of cinema, like the Battle of Hoth, the asteroid chase sequence, and there's also the climactic duel with Luke and Vader that ends with one of the most iconic and parodied plot twists in cinema. I mean, I just love to travel back in time to 1980 and sneak into a cinema screen just to see people's reactions to that plot twist, because we didn't have social media back then. So yeah, and also this film has Yoda, who is one of the best characters in the whole franchise, with his weird way of speaking and his wisdom. So yeah, this is an example of a sequel done well. You go on a darker turn and challenge your characters. Don't repeat what you did before. Number 1, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. We are here, ladies and gentlemen. We are at the number 1 spot, and it just so happens to be the one that started it all. If it was for this film, cinema wouldn't be the same. I mean, it has that classic tale of a farm boy going on a big adventure to save a princess from an evil empire, and something I just love is how the franchise just grew from this film. And as a filmmaking student myself, I always look to George Lucas's efforts and how well this film did as inspiration. And apart from that, I think this film has it all. A brilliant cast of characters like Luke, Han, Leia, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Vader, C-3PO and R2-D2. It has fantastic action, like the various shootouts in the Death Star and the Battle of Yavin, and also the opening battle in the Tantive V4. And it also has some incredible shots like Binary Sunset, and it also has a very iconic and engaging story with Luke basically finding out that his dad was once a Jedi, and he goes on this journey with Obi-Wan Kenobi to find out more about his father. And basically Luke Skywalker has the most iconic hero's journey out there, going from this young farm boy who meets up with Obi-Wan, goes on this adventure, saves Princess Leia, loses Obi-Wan, and helps out the rebellion, blow up the Death Star. And oh my goodness, I also thought Han Solo goes through a great character arc as well, where at the start he's just this no-good smuggler who's only in it for the money. He just joined Luke and Obi-Wan just so he could get paid. But then, by the end of the film, he ends up helping out the rebellion after he saved Luke at the very last second from Darth Vader. And I know, I could just gush about this film for hours and hours and hours and on end, because I love it to death. It's not just my favourite Star Wars movie of all time, it's my favourite movie of all time. That's how much I love it. I can quote this movie from beginning to end. I absolutely adore Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. It's my favourite movie of all time, and it just so easily lands at number 1. And there you have it. That is my Star Wars movie and TV show ranking. What did you think of this ranking? I hope you enjoyed this list, and yeah, Bad Batch is out on May the 4th, so I hope it's good, and may the Force be with you all.